Today, for you, I have the full extent of the leaks from the Signal Houthi group chat that has come out just now, basically. And it has all of the clues we need to surmise who exactly is to blame for this leak, what should happen to Michael Waltz as a national security advisor, and why the hell did some liberal journalist, editor in chief at The Atlantic, get hands on this sort of group chat access. Let's get into it. So, first, we start out with Michael Waltz adding Jeffrey Goldberg, or Joe Goldberg rather, to this message group. Now, this is very confusing because as a Trump supporter, I don't want the administration to take an L. Even if it's some underling that Trump hired, like Michael Waltz, it still matters that his people don't make mistakes, especially when it comes down to what could be purported to be classified documentation. Now, according to Waltz, who's trying to save his own skin, as anybody would in his position, he is basically saying that he's going to take full responsibility, as seen here, for creating the group. But then he also deflected by saying that Goldberg inclusion in the group chat could have been also that he somehow inappropriately inserted himself into the group chat. Now, obviously, that seems asinine. You can't just invite yourself to a group chat on virtually any app, okay? You have to be invited by people already inside. Now, this seems to be very fishy from the outset. The excuses get even more crazy when you look at Waltz in the same interview he did in this case, saying that Goldberg may have been on his phone under the wrong contact name. He says, have you ever had somebody's contact name that shows their name and then you have them and then you don't have the right number there? Right? You got somebody else's number under the same contact or somebody else's contact. So, of course, I didn't see that loser in the group. It looked like everybody else or someone else. So, this seems like a BS excuse. So, there's three narratives that Michael Waltz is going for. Again, I don't really have loyalty to Michael Waltz. I don't know the guy. And well, actually, I might have. Anyway, I don't know if I've met him, but the point being is that Michael Waltz is more of like an establishmentarian, not the most MAGA person in the cabinet by far. No love lost. That being said, he has three separate alibis. One being that, or rather, him taking responsibility is option one. Two is that apparently somebody like Goldberg here inserted himself in the group, which seems like just stupid. Three is that somehow he had the wrong contact. Now, how often does that happen? Maybe with older people, that could be the case where you forget. But I mean, Michael Waltz is younger than my dad. He is like only 50 years old or something. You should know how this stuff works, okay? My contacts are all the right numbers. Am I crazy? Now, I will show you a passing glance as to what was in the group chat, but a lot of it doesn't really matter insofar as what's entertaining. For example, this is just a little technicality or formality saying, hey, send me your deputies for all of the relative departments and we'll put them all in the group chat. Hence why you ended up with 19 people in the group. So again, all names that are deputies of all the people that are in the chat. Now, looking at this, Michael Waltz says, team, you should have a statement of conclusions with taskings per the president's guidance this morning in your high side inboxes. Now, one thing you have to keep in mind in this case is that these high side inboxes are supposed to be a level above the Signal chat group where they're more classified in so much as their information is containing a lot of stuff that would otherwise be really bad for the media to get their hands on. So on one hand, you do have pretty sensitive information given the time that these were released in this group chat called the Houthi PC chat, but also keep in mind that when it comes down to the high side inbox, this is yet another rung which the Joe guy was not invited into. So this might be an important detail in the case. Now, this is a quite interesting part of the whole sequence of events. So JD Vance has this huge blurb, which makes him out to look pretty good, even more MAGA than even proposedly Trump. And so there's a lot of people that are pushing out conspiracies saying that JD Vance was trying to basically oust Michael Waltz by having him be the scapegoat for inviting a journalist in to then have his own guy called Michael Anton to become the new NSA director or advisor. That being said, or national security advisor. That being said, is that really true? Let's see what he says in the first place. So he says, I'm out for an event in Michigan, but I think we're making a mistake in relation to bombing the Houthis. 3% of U.S. trade runs through the Suez Canal. 40% of European trade does also. There's a real risk that the public doesn't understand why this is necessary. The strongest reason to do this, as POTUS said, is to send a message. But I am not sure that the president is aware how inconsistent this is with his message in Europe right now. There's a real risk that we can see a moderate or severe spike in oil prices. So here he is contradicting the other people in the chat, implicitly also contradicting Trump, saying like, hey, he hasn't thought this through yet, which a lot of people that are MAGA could say, wow, that's like very disloyal, though I could say that maybe it's Trump's duty to actually know what's going to happen to oil prices if he bombs a neighboring country to the Saudis. The vice president goes on to keep saying that he'll support whatever Trump ends up doing, but basically saying that they ought to wait a month to see how the market reacts to the tariffs and how the economy is going in general, but then also to take into account what happens with the Houthis in relation to Israel and their ceasefire, and there's a lot of moving parts here. That being said, we have people like Joe Kent, who ran for Congress and lost twice in a row, narrowly. He is the under guy, or like the deputy for Tulsi Gabbard. Okay, he's basically contradicting JD, saying that there's no reason to really wait here. And then John Radcliffe from the CIA also is saying that he's actually backing up JD Vance, saying that a delay would not negatively impact us at all, and then an additional time would be used to identify better starting points for coverage on Houthi leadership. So again, so Radcliffe and Vance are the only ones out of 19 or 18, I guess, because there's a mole in there that's not saying anything, that are basically saying that we shouldn't bomb them yet. Now we have some butting heads here. Pete Hegseth, who generally you could say has more power than does JD Vance, actually, because obviously Department of Defense has more influence than the VP, who basically has no power. It's just like wait and see if the other guy dies sort of position. And so Pete Hegseth is kind of in a weird position where he's trying to kind of appease the Trump sentiment, but then also he has his own power that he has to like leverage. And then also there's JD, that on paper is the second in command of the country, yet it's not really the case. However, Pete Hegseth replies to JD saying, I understand your concerns and fully support you raising them with the president. Important considerations, most of which are tough to know how they play out. So the economy, Ukraine, peace, Gaza, etc. I think messaging is going to be tough no matter what. Nobody knows who the Houthis are, which is why we should stay focused on these talking points, which would be Biden failed and two, Iran funded it. So there you go. So again, similar verbiage to other people in the group chat. He's saying that waiting a month does not change the calculus fundamentally. Now, this is really a gem to find because you'll never see this just in public, but because of these leaks, we get to see this. We are prepared to execute, says Pete Hegseth. And if I had a final go or no go vote, I believe we should. Okay, this is not about the Houthis. I see it as two things: restoring freedom and navigation, a core national interest, and then two, reestablish deterrence, which Biden cratered. But we can easily pause, and if we do, I will do with all I can to 100% secure OPSEC. So that's like security. I will welcome other thoughts. And so he's saying, if I get the last say, I want to bomb the Houthis, which is awkward because Trump wants to bomb the Houthis, and he's having the people beneath him basically just do all the dirty work to see logistically, okay, how are we going to bomb them, with what jets, what drones? And then on top of that, you have people like JD, who on paper should have more power than the Department of Defense Secretary Hegseth, but he really doesn't in real life terms. And so they're both kind of butting heads, knowing that Daddy Trump is going to give the last word. And so it's awkward because JD has probably a more informed opinion than Trump. But still, it doesn't matter because Trump gets the final say. And then it's also very dubious that when Pete says that he has whether or not he has a no-go, as a final say in the bombing of the Houthis, again, it's dubious that he really does at all. So that's why he's saying it as a hypothetical. Again, a lot of specifics. If you want to pause the video, go ahead. Like the video if you want to read these, because I'm not going to read these all verbatim. It's a lot of political stuff. Some key points of this is that basically the European navies, according to Michael Waltz, do not have the capacity to defend the missiles being shot into the Red Sea by the Houthi terrorists. And so he's saying that basically we're the only ones that could fix this problem. Hence why, we need to bomb the Houthis. Okay. Another one of the early leaks that you might have seen 3 days ago is JD Vance replying to Pete Hegseth saying, if you think we should do it, let's go. I just hate bailing Europe out again. So this is JD conceding defeat. JD had a point to make. Everybody heard it out, and they mostly disagreed, minus one guy, the CIA director, Radcliffe. And JD is saying, well, Pete, you do have the final say to Trump. Basically, you're the last guy that's going to talk to him. Screw it. Okay, I'll just go with it. There's no way I'm going to talk Trump out of bombing the Houthis, so let's go. Okay, so he's conceding that basically Pete Hegseth in this one area of expertise has more clout than does JD Vance. An important note to take. Also, I just hate bailing out Europe again. So again, him kvetching about the Europeans, which is an awkward situation, of course, because yeah, bombing the Houthis helps Europe more than it helps America. It helps Israel more than it helps us, obviously because of proximity and other reasons. But that being said, the Europeans, according to Michael Waltz, who's stupid enough to have this scandal in the first place, so maybe I shouldn't trust his words, but if you take him at face value, he's positing that the Europeans could not stop this problem without our ships and their technology. And obviously, as Americans, we know that we have the best Navy in the world. And so maybe that's true. So it's awkward. Apparently, Trump is going to seek the Europeans to pay for our mission in the Red Sea to bomb the Houthis, which is a good trade-off, I think. All right, so Pete Hegseth here says, and this is one of the final pieces, I fully share your loathing of the European freeloading. It's pathetic, but Mike is correct. We are the only ones on the planet on our side of the ledger who can do this. And then at the very end, he says, I think that we should go, but POTUS still retains 24 hours of decision space. So again, that's the dynamic. It basically goes Trump and then the Secretary of Defense, and then JD, I suppose. Some more by Stephen Miller, famous guy in the Trump administration. I think he's deputy chief of staff, basically talking about how the Europeans are going to pay us back. This is some of the more scandalous stuff, of course. People on the left are saying that this is classified information. You could argue it either way, because obviously, if this were sent to the Houthi military the day before these strikes were to take place, that would clearly jeopardize the bombing. And so, to some extent, by implication, in the spirit of the word classified in a military context, it seems to be totally the case that this would be classified information. That being said, is this legally or technically classified information? I don't think so. That being said, of course, it's still horrible, because imagine if you don't know, and mind you, they didn't put in coordinates, they didn't say who they were going to bomb, they didn't say where they're going to bomb, but if you're a small country or a small faction of a country like Yemen, and you know that they're going to strike at a specific time, you're going to bunker down in that time, and then most of the damage that otherwise would have been wrought on those people basically gets avoided because they just hide in bunkers in that time. So that's still pretty important, and thankfully it didn't get leaked before the bombings happened. No, the ironic part here that was highlighted by CNN that I'm ripping off here, basically, Hegseth says we're currently clean on operational security. Now, that obviously a point of irony. I don't know. This is interesting. Michael Waltz has had a few typos in this course of conversation. I haven't showed all of them, but here he has a discombobulated mini paragraph, and then he basically clarifies that he was typing too quick, and then he corrects himself. This is the mutual pat on the back for a successful bombing of Yemen. Here, nothing major. Again, more kudos being passed around. And then if you look here also, you have Tulsi Gabbard saying great work in effects. I don't know what effects means in this context. All right, and so there we have it. That was the entirety of the Signal group chat that was made for the bombing of the Houthi installations in the country of Yemen. Let me know what you thought about these. I personally think it's a pretty bad foible to have as a president of the United States. If you hired somebody who had this happen, I would expect Donald Trump to fire Michael Waltz. He apparently did not. I'm assuming probably because, number one, he didn't think it was a big deal. Two, he didn't think it'd happen again. Three, he wants more loyalty out of the guy now that he's gotten kicked while he's down. Four is that, of course, Trump doesn't want to take the loss of having to fire somebody in his administration, because that was very embarrassing the first term when he had to fire so many people and made things look like it was a chaotic environment. And so what I think the Trump administration is betting on is that people will just forget about this, and that the Teflon Don moniker stays true to its name, because frankly, folks, it seems like that's the way it's playing out. However, I would have fired Michael Waltz and replaced him with somebody more populist, somebody more based, dare I say, more MAGA. But that's what we're dealing with today. Anyways, that's the video. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe to this channel if you want more content like this, and comment down below what your thoughts are, and I'll see y'all on the next one. Adios.